This is Second Wind.
Our guest today is none other than the great Wes ter Haar. He's been hailed as an Ad Age creativity all-star and served as the very first president of Cannes Lions Digital Craft Jury.
Hey!
Wes, what are you drinking this morning? I know it's tea, but I'm looking for more detail on that.
It's a very straightforward, boring breakfast tea.
I love that. Just
English
a simple guy
breakfast
at
tea
heart.
in honor of Carrie.
Oh,
Sure
and
you'll
my
be.
cat as well.
Coming to America. Yeah, no, we are in year 25. When we started the company in a basement, we did get some international work, mostly because the internet, as we used to call it, was a very small place indeed. And if you did anything cool, random international companies would reach out. But then we mostly were a local market player for about a decade, got the taste of it by setting up a London office, and then very quickly wanted to expand into New York based on a single visit that ended up providing us our biggest budget ever. So it did really feel like the streets were paved with gold. And then I think we spent a year not winning any work, after which we called Jake and said, hey.
I mean, America has all the money, right?
Well, so the interesting thing that I've always, like, there were a few real cultural differences, but the reality is for everyone in our industry and in most industries, breaking the US is the most valuable thing to do, which means it also attracts all of the
Breaking the US.
best, well, maybe a little less at the moment, but it attracts all of the key companies, and they tend to send their most senior people. So you do get into a bit of the best continuously, and it's very competitive. Culturally, we did New York first, and I think a market that is very open to giving new people and new companies a shot. So I actually found it interesting how often you would just get an opportunity. I think you can see that as something bad if you're sort of there a longer term. You can go, that where's the loyalty, right? We've worked together. Why is everything
The
pitched?
incumbents, yeah.
If you're new, it's amazing because everybody's looking for the energy of new companies, new teams, new talent. The level, I think this has leveled out a little over time. But when we first went there, the level of pitch was way higher. So in Europe, you would really pitch more conceptually. Like you would sort of write a few slides of highfalutin copy and a few sketches, and you'd be like, it'll be amazing. And then in the US, because it was so competitive, everybody was pitching super high quality prototypes.
Did you make it yet,
designs. Well, that's the thing. You had to sort of be extremely polished in your pitch. And it took us a while to really get used to that difference. I honestly think it's leveled out because a lot of the sort of the pitch wars of the early 2010s in digital production, which was this amazing period of time where you had some of the world's best companies just going at it across the globe every week in like 4 pitches. I think that leveled up. We did okay. That leveled up the pitch expectation. Yeah. So I think that's now the de facto sort of standard across the globe. I think this is partly down to budgets, but partly just also down to culture. I can remember having to make sort of a switch because selling in our local market and to some extent in the UK, you were selling safety. Like, this is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. And you sort of had to show risk mitigation, but that felt more like dream killing if you did it in the US. So we had like this rule. If you're pitching for the US, you can't dream kill, right? Because then people are like,
it's like ambition, right?
Yeah, it's ambition. It's not thinking too much in constraints. It's wanting to get like this continuous what's possible push. It's a little, of course, we're sort of generalizing a little, but that was a real takeaway. Like, you have to not dream kill, which in Europe was often seen as, oh, these people are thinking about the risk. In the US, it was like, who are these guys? Get them out of here.
So, I mean, 25 years ago, the world was a different place, but the industry too. And you were pioneering, you were at the coalface basically for the digital craft, for the digital industry. What was one of the most naive things that you thought about the industry going in, and that you learned really quickly just wasn't actually the case?
I mean, we had to learn everything because we literally had not learned anything relevant from a school perspective for what we ended up doing. I think we really had to get used to the sort of project management piece. Right, you sort of naively go into this going, if you do cool work, everything will be fine. And of course, that is not the case. So early years, lots of focus on how do you manage projects? I think naively, I think honestly, some of that was the interesting part of being a digital company in that time. You ended up just saying yes to a lot of stuff where nobody really knew if it was possible. But that naivete was the superpower where you're like, I think we can do something like that, possibly, maybe. Let's just say yes and figure it out.
And
Which
clients love that.
it's also I mean that in the end is where a lot of really exciting fun work comes from. Not just saying yes and then selling and solving, as we used to call that. I think we, from a business perspective, we probably underestimated we underestimated how long it takes for brands to sort of move the needle on digital. So we were, I think, very early with the digital evangelizing, predicting the death of TV, all of the things that you do when you're young and excited about online. Those things, of course, did not play out that way. And you can make a case that digital became more like TV, right? We sort of had this massive switch away from interactive, although you can feel some of it coming back at the moment. But this idea of it's a lean forward medium and people like interaction and some type of active engagement. And really there was this relatively aggressive switch that really made digital a small TV screen from an advertising perspective for quite a few years. That was probably very different to what we expected when we were evangelizing.
So I think we touched on a few pivots in that last answer. Like what has kept you agile throughout all of this? Is it a survival skill? Do you think that that's the only way creative leaders are going to grow and thrive in the future?
It's interesting because we made a few large sort of changes to the business, and looking back at some of them, I have no idea how we got to the decision. We had a pivot where we went from, because when you look at the first version of the company, it was MediaMonks interactive art, super artsy, not really a commercial business, although we were working for commercial clients, but really as artists.
Like Flash websites, are we talking about?
Yeah, super high-end Flash. People really don't know. They don't know, right? You would make something for
We're not talking about
Nintendo.
superhero Flash.
No, well, we'll pour one out. But what was interesting at that time, you were really being commissioned to do work. You weren't being hired to do work. You were being commissioned. So people would look at your portfolio and go, "We would like something like that." And then sometimes you would do that, and sometimes you're like, we will do something else. But you would launch something, and you would have your own logo on it. So you would launch something for Nintendo made by MediaMonks, right? So it was more of a
Were the
commission
budgets good?
artist.
I remember the budgets were like
no.
really good for microsites for a while.
No. This is pre the what was the most famous one? The Citizen Kane of microsites.
The North Kane did?
Yeah.
Which one? Which was that?
What's it called again?
I'm blanking on the...
But that's the Citizen Kane of
know.
microsites. It was like at the peak of the big budget. This was pre that. Everything was like $5,000 and you just worked on it for 4 months. Then we became a local market digital advertising agency, which was a temporary category, right? It was the moment where the normal ad agencies hadn't figured out digital. But we felt that category was temporary. So at a certain moment in time, we fired all of our direct clients, pivoted into digital production for the bigger networks, then used that to go from local to international, massively leveled up our craft and went into this sort of extreme high quality digital production for a while together with Unit 9 and Stink and Be Real, North Kingdom. You probably had about 10 at most, although I would say it was mostly a top 5. And then via that work, which made us a global company, pivoted direct to clients, built out a completely different set of services. And then, of course, pivoted into, as part of that, we'd taken private equity funding, and we pivoted into S4 really as a network competitor. And then probably about 3 years ago, we sort of called the AI transformation a little more aggressive, I think, than most, and sort of went very hardcore into that version of the company. The framework we tend to use is, I think as a business founder or runner or owner or whatever you want to sort of define it as, you sort of have to have a little feeling of what's happening. And then we have a sort of a framework which is extremely simple. Like, is this thing that we think is happening real? Like, is that going to be something? Is it like temporary, or is it like a real thing? And then if it's real, is it really happening right now? Or are we too early? Or Because I can remember during our time, you had the year of mobile, but it was always like a prediction of the year of mobile. 2005 is going to be the year of mobile. 2006 is going to be the year of mobile. 2007. And then it really took the iPhone and then really App Store to become the year of mobile. So we were always like, is it real? And if it's real, are we too early? And we sort of use that framework continuously to make those pivots. And that I think has worked well for us. I think in today's landscape, I'm in two minds. On the one hand, the world is changing so quickly that if there's no agility, it feels like you'll sort of be less and less relevant relatively quickly. The change is also so big and the clock speed of it is so high. You could also spend like 6 months trying to figure something out. And then there's something that happens from a technology perspective and everything you try to figure out is useless. It's difficult, I think some companies will win because they're on the edge of it, and some companies will win because they waited it out and then they ended up just being able to jump on something that was easier than the companies that had to figure it out. And we'll see how that plays out for Apple, for instance, with the AI conversations currently. I think that's a very large, visible example. And
them acquiring a LLM.
Yeah, the rumors are there. I don't think they've pulled the trigger yet, but I know the rumors were Perplexity, although Perplexity really isn't an LLM. The French one, I always forget, Mistral. It'll be really interesting. I think a lot of people were saying they should buy Anthropic, but I think their valuation came in at 183 billion.
Now, Wes, let me ask you, agencies, because I think, I see a real need more than ever for brands to have expertise to support them to design experiences and content and campaigns and tell stories. But then it just feels like it's so competitive now. Like every kind of company is chasing those marketing budgets, and they're probably expected to deliver more for less, as you know. As an agency leader, somebody that's leading thousands of people in your company, like, do you think agencies are fucked?
Yes.
Short answer.
And with that,
yeah.
And we say that
I have a bottle of mezcal here somewhere.
Oh my God, let's do it.
Completely fucked. But the way you're framing it is the interesting part of the context. If you would have to describe the type of company that has a high chance of success in the current landscape, it probably looks something like agencies do. To sort of lots of change, outline-driven, interesting talent. Creativity, not for every agency, but creativity tends to be at the core of these types of organizations. But agencies as an organism are, I think, really well suited to what's happening, because you need a lot of creativity to think through the opportunities. You have to have a talent base that probably looks quite similar to what an agency talent base looks like. You have to be able to reinvent your business, which good agencies do every few years anyway. So there's a lot in the agency landscape that I think makes us as a group extremely suitable to this moment. The flip side of that is we make our money mostly selling the time of people, and those people mostly do things that look a lot like what generative AI does quite well already, right? So that to me is tough. I also think because of that, a lot of the agency landscape is not being realistic about what's happening, is not being transparent about it, is trying to wave it off. And we saw that at Cannes continuously, right? This one thing that agencies do really well, the technology will never do. It's not based on anything.
It's been amazing how enduring storytelling in like film has been. That sort of like canonical, like creative shop making films, big brand films, has really like not gone away in the slightest. If anything, it's almost become more important in the social, everything digital and mobile has become social, right? And like it's mostly video, right?
So
and so like
the bulk of it is podcasts. We get to do podcasts together.
Yeah, even their video now, right? Like everything's video.
Oh well, no, there's a call earlier today with a client who wants to do AI podcast generated on top of data sets. But so I think where the fight, like the world needs is maybe the wrong word, but the world needs marketing, right? So marketing won't go away. the question is, do you need agencies for marketing? And
Mm.
the answer more and more is no, you can do it with your tech partners. No, you can do it with your in-house team. And it doesn't mean the agency has no relevance, but if relevance to some extent is revenue, there's clear parts of your revenue stack that are going to go elsewhere. And that makes it really difficult for agencies to be innovating. It's really difficult to innovate if you're not growing. It's really difficult to innovate if business is going away. So I think the agency is fucked. I think as a category, yes. I think as a category, fully, yes.
Who's going to make it through, do you think?
So, well, I think we have a decent shot, but we're to some extent trying to be post agency, right? I don't think I think it becomes about what's the value you're adding to your clients' business problems. I think the problem that we have as an agency landscape is we hero and celebrate some of that amazing storytelling and big idea work. We get very incestuous about it, but most agencies don't make their money there, not even close. I would say most agencies lose their money there, right? Everybody on this call knows what happens. We used to call it lion hunting. What happens 3 to 4 months before Cannes? Everybody starts making up amazing potential cases and then does them for free or not a lot of money. The industry problem is the work that we celebrate now for easily a decade or two has not been the work that makes us money as an industry. And the work that makes industry money is a lot of the work that is under pressure from technology, from agents, from in-house teams. So there has to be a value prop repositioning. Like, what are you actually doing that is both valuable and makes you money? And I think a lot of the agency landscape is going to struggle with that over the next few years.
That's hard though, right? Because like if you pay someone for their time, you can tell them what to do. But if you're not paying them for their time, it changes that power dynamic in that if there are other incentives and, compensation in place that's tied to performance, like who's the client then?
So the time piece is interesting because to talk about that for a moment, right? So the problem is if you're a client, there was some really interesting BCG data on this as well recently. Most brands do not trust their agencies to innovate using AI. I think it was a horrible number. It's 86% of clients do not trust their creative agency to use AI in a meaningful way. I think it was 67% don't trust their media agency to use it in a meaningful way. So your clients fundamentally distrusting their agency partners, which is a problem because the brands, especially marketing departments, have to put numbers on the board, right? They have to show we're adapting or we're adopting the technology, we're adapting to the technology. So they need partners to help show that. The problem from an agency perspective is if we do all of the work to train our teams, if we pay all of the additional licensing fees, if we put all of the investment into workflows, knowledge bases, tuned models, and we can only get paid for the hours of a person using those workflows, models, platforms, that's an impossible business, right? Because then all of the margin that's already quite tight gets eroded. It's like the fundamental challenge is if we just sell the hours of people, then we either have to eat, it's like tariffs. We either have to eat the full innovation tariff, which is impossible, especially because clients expect a lot of innovation. But then they have to pay in different methods. Otherwise, there's no way to run a normal margin, healthy margin business. And that's going to be the sort of standoff in the industry over the next, let's call it 18 months.
I've been surprised because, a lot of what we're seeing in the market is marketeers asking for better, faster, cheaper, with maybe the cheaper being the flashing word in all of that. And to me, I feel like the opportunity is like, AI isn't really the problem, right? It's the business model with AI attached to it that's the problem. If you come up with a new business model, then everyone can win. And yet I don't see, and maybe, you see more opportunities than we do. I don't see a lot of marketeers embracing the fact that if you figure out a new model, you're going to be CMO of somewhere very, very quickly because you're going to be the person who did the thing. So I guess the question is, are marketing departments more fucked than agencies?
I think they're under massive pressure. Which I see as mostly opportunity for them. I think marketing, and we see that with I would say our most forward-looking clients. The marketing organization is expected to change the most or the first, right? Every marketing organization is getting looks from the CEO, from the CFO. They have to report to the board what they're doing with AI, generative AI. If you embrace that, it also means you become the sort of leading light of the internal AI transformations. I actually see it as an opportunity for internal marketing teams to work their way back up the C-suite ladder, because they own the transformation roadmap for probably the biggest topic or top 3 topic for every business on the planet, or every Fortune 500 business. So I think it's mostly opportunity. I'm seeing a switch. There's definitely still cost conversations, but we're seeing more and more marketing organizations not so much worry about what they're spending, but where they're spending it. So they want to spend the same amount of money or maybe more. They just want to be able to redistribute it, because they have to figure out how to grow the business. Like, that's maybe an even bigger ask currently for a lot of industries is, can we still grow? And that's where the discussion with AI becomes a little less about, are we creating faster, better, cheaper? It's more, are we creating faster, which makes us more relevant? Are we creating better, which drives higher conversion? And cheaper is then more of an unlock, because it's cheaper. We can do more, we can test more, we can try more. But we're seeing that, I would say, almost as the driving ask from marketing teams currently, is how do we use this to grow the business? Which is a massive challenge, right? There's economy isn't great. Tariffs are complex, so everybody is under pressure to find revenue.
I wanted to ask you about ambition and reputation. When we very first met, I remember you and Victor told me that you wanted to be the biggest digital production company on the planet.
I think having a sort of a clearly defined and slightly bullish ambition just helps. Like, it's very difficult for something to happen if you haven't talked about it, formalized it, repeated it ad nauseum. So that I think has been a driving force in the business really for a very long time. Put something interesting on the board, try and get as close to it as possible. I think at this moment in time, from an ambition perspective, I think this is by far the biggest shift in our industry since we've been a part of it. And we've been a part of it for quite a long time now. So that, by its very definition, is one of the most exciting things I've ever seen. We're so close still to the coalface. We're so in the midst of everything that's happening. It feels like it's strange to say these things out loud, but I think a relatively small group of companies will end up doing really, really well. I think we're ideally set up to be one of that small group. I think it's bigger than marketing. It always sounded weird when we used to talk about it, that I think we're looking at industrial revolution type change. And I think we're a company that's very close to what that means in our industry, but we're already seeing that spider out away from marketing. In entertainment, we're selling software now, which is very different. We are doing big system integration processes that have nothing to do with marketing, but our supply chain, our other parts of the org. So to me, AI is such a general purpose moment that it allows companies with the right talent base and the right ambition to broaden their aperture massively. That's the ambition. And it's exciting because everything is happening in a massively sped up way. And there's something that happens every other week or so that changes your own perception of what that actually means, roadmap, timing, potential. So it's a very sort of hands-on opportunity. And reputationally, I think we as a business have always had a reputation of being an innovator. So people trust us to innovate. I won't name names, but there are a lot of companies that are now like, we're an AI company, or like, but clearly you're not.
But we're spending so much.
Name some names.
We're spending $300 million a year, Wes, on AI.
$312 million a year, Gully. $112 million. I would love
for storyboards.
to see.
We got
I would love to see what
storyboards.
comes out of that.
Fucking storyboards are incredible.
Well, but that's the thing, right? There's a lot of messaging. There's a lot of like that to me is, and honestly, I recognize it, right? Our industry sort of lives and dies on the hype cycle. And as an agency, 9 times out of 10, when the hype cycle happens, you are just looking to tell the right story against the hype cycle, because you can deliver that story with your existing organizational structure and talent base. You're like, social, amazing. We have people that make stuff. We have people that think about stuff. We now think and make social stuff, right? So you're changing the front lines of the story. And once in a while, something happened where like, fuck, this is a whole different company. And that happened when we went from everything is TV and print, internet is a thing now. That fundamentally changed how organizations were staffed, structured. You can make a case that that still is a challenge now for some companies, right? We're like a generation into this and it's still a struggle. This is one of those big moments where you can't just skirt and put a few slides together and go, we're an AI company, because you're not. And that to me is why it's so interesting, because it's a before and after moment. And it's going to take a while, right? These things play out slower than they could, and maybe they should, but it's going to play out.
We can try and the market might believe us. I mean, it's worth a try, right? To just chuck AI in the quarterly report 50 times. So
just mention it a lot.
You mentioned that like framework for making decisions before. Is it real and is it now, right? And I think, I go back to like November 2022 when ChatGPT launched, right? Can you talk us through that? Because you guys, I see a lot of pictures. You're a long way ahead of any other agency or production company I've seen in terms of like how thoughtful you're being with AI. It's not just like a tool for a job. It's about a system, and it's about change and transformation. And I think we're on a lot of calls with big companies where like a lot of experienced people who've been in the industry for a long time, who know how to do things the old way, are sitting there going, oh, we're fucked. We're all fucked. We're out of a job. But I think that's tempered with the fact that 99% of brands have not implemented or adopted the technology in a meaningful way. Now, it's a two-pronged question, okay? The first question is, tell us about the framework for that decision around going all in on AI, when back in November 2022, that was a very weird thing to do. And then also, like, what's the biggest blocker for implementation at big brands that you see?
Yeah. So it's interesting. There's actually a presentation that I've now dubbed the I Told You So presentation, and it was done by our labs team to me in 2000. I think it might have been earlier even. I think it was 2021, maybe 2020, where our R&D team was like, hey, this thing's going to happen. It's going to be crazy. I was like, sure, well. So we should have been earlier. When we saw the toy to tool moment, I think for me and for us, we spent time with a small group to sort of honestly reason it through. So no defensiveness, no, yes, but it can't do this and it can't do that. We had enough grounding in the technology to understand the sort of idea of predictably better systems based on compute and data. We just looked at it and went, if the scaling law holds, then the line that goes up and to the right goes right through our whole industry. And not just ours. I think most computer-based services industries, it just goes up and to the right and it goes through pretty much that whole space. So we looked at that, decided that it was real and really happening. Decided that it was real because we had dabbled in the space. We had the I Told You So presentation. We knew how quickly it had moved from the work that we were even doing 3 or 6 months before to that moment, which meant really, if you believe that it's real and really happening, that is a whole different business. It means you need to change the commercial model. It means you need to change the internal sort of ways of working, and it means you need to change talent and team structure. But it was early, right? So the first, I would say, 6 months,
you just change the deck.
Change the deck, 100%. You start with changing the deck, right? So you go, we have a point of view. We believe this to be true. Let's start talking about this. It's sort of hilarious. Thought leadership in market early 2023 called the future will be generated, or the revolution will be generated, something along those lines. If you go and look at it now, super polished, mature thought leadership. I would say probably the best thought leadership in market at that time. Zero interest in it. Nobody cared. We have like these sessions with analysts, and we track if we send them something. We sent them our point of view on generative AI months, quarters before there was any interest, and nobody looked at it. We were already talking to clients about it. It was like, what are you talking about? Then the earnings call started to happen. And there was one company, I think it was called, was educational company that in their quarterly earnings call said, oh, by the way, we've lost 20% of our business because of ChatGPT. And it freaked everybody out. So suddenly every analyst was calling
They lost like
literally
3
just trying-
billion in a day.
Yeah. And everyone was like, are we fucked as well? So everybody just started reaching out. And all the analysts were just looking at what category company do we put in the winner and the loser bucket. All clients were like, what does this mean for us? And we had at that time already like really healthy, I would say, thought leadership and go to markets around it. So we were able to get the first wave of work through the door before anybody else did. And that to me is what innovation means. You get more swings at bat, you figure out things more quickly, you learn, and it's a compounding effect. It's really difficult to catch up with somebody who's had 10 swings at bat and you're not at your first, because you learn. And we were able to capture those learnings, put them back into our internal plans and our client go-to-market. The blockers, one by one, initially were legal, understandably so. We said from day one, this is machine learning, not machine copying. There is not a copyright risk. I think that's borne out to be true so far with all of the cases. Enterprise is about risk mitigation. There are still enterprise organizations to this day that will not touch generative AI, maybe rightfully so, or only touch it with the safest, most identified stack, which makes sense. Then the second blocker was ethics. What should we generate? Do we generate people? Do we say that we generate stuff? That whole wave, I think that's still conversations. And I think every company should have their own sort of North Star. And after that, it really becomes about adoption. So I'm sure you read or at least saw it come by the mid report, 95% of AI pilots fail. What we see with a lot of organizations, they do 1 million pilots, but they do these very siloed, small tests and nothing really scales. That I think is the reality. This is such a shift that you need to adapt your own organizational structure to get the full potential impact. So a lot of this is about change management. A lot of it is about talent enablement. A lot of it is about de-siloing organizations. It's just it's a bigger lift than I think many people really understand. So a lot
You
of
can't just plug it in. You've got to
organizations-
rewire your house. No one wants to do that.
and that's the thing, right? It's not necessarily the sort of 3-year digital transformation stuff from back in the day, but it's also not magic button off the shelf. And there's something in between those things we call applied AI that I think a lot of organizations do a bunch of pilots and it takes them sort of 6 months to figure out, wait a minute, this is not really how it works. So yeah, legal
We need to get a
ethics.
committee to talk about AI for a while, right?
Well, there is an interesting piece, which is who owns AI in the organization, right? I've seen everything from HR to IT to marketing. So there's also a lot of who leads it. But yeah, it's when it works, it works, and that you start seeing sort of the real change. So yeah, as more cases come out and more. I think you also see some brands I think are a little hesitant to communicate about using AI because they're not 100% convinced that the consumer wants it. So I think some of the messaging is a little slow, but as more big brands start openly talking about it, I think you'll start getting more of a FOMO, and then adoption is sort of almost quicker.
To the ambition thing for a second, what's a project that you'd really love to do that you'd never be considered for, pre-AI?
Yeah, it's like we're doing something at the moment that is agentic workflows within a pretty old school traveling salesman sales process. So it's an organization that has salespeople on the road. Typical stuff, right? How do you get the right information to your salespeople? How do you limit their admin load? How do you give them the best sort of specific sales narrative for that type of client and that type of industry? Like it's really fun, extremely solvable problem with agentic workflows, but would not be something that we would normally ever see. But it's actually the thing that is really fun. And we're seeing a lot of those opportunities where you're going into an organization with sort of a frontline deployed team, 3-4 people in the guts of an organization, just figuring things out and then sort of applying AI in really sort of practical, meaningful ways. That to me is some of the most fun stuff at the moment, where it's just solve a problem.
Did that client know that was the problem they wanted to solve, or did you help them figure out that could be the solution?
We've been, again, a little early. Probably we've been beating the drum on agents for a while now. And I have to say, I think the concept of agents has made AI a little more parsable by clients, because agents just feels like, oh, it's sort of a thing that does a job. So it feels a little easier for people to understand. So a lot of this type of work has come out of our just focus on agents, where people are like, wait a minute, but that isn't just marketing, right? And we're like, no, you can use it in finance, HR, sales. So I think our point of view on agents and our existing work in that space has opened up those questions.
Who inspires you, Wesley?
Well, this lovely group of people, of course.
And I thank
That's not going to work
Well,
because
it works. It's working.
I steal
here.
from you. So
But inspired, like I have to say, I've never really had that as a thing. I just try and read and now listen to a lot of stuff. And try and sort of use that to make up my mind. At this moment in time, I follow a lot of the AI researchers on X and the sort of typical podcast space. The Dwarkesh podcast I really like. Not sure if you Dwarkesh Patel. So, but not just in sort of the straight and narrow space. I actually am more excited with AI and generative AI in areas of healthcare and biology, and just hearing people think through the process there. I think that's also why I think our industry feels a little antiquated at the moment, where this technology is doing groundbreaking, life-saving work at scale in massive multi-billion-dollar companies in trillion-dollar industries, and we're sort of, yes, but it can't come up with a script for
a talking
campaign.
Cat.
Right, it's clearly bullshit. But yeah, I follow a lot of that information because I think it also opens your thinking, bringing it back to your own industry. There's actually a really interesting interview with the DeepMind CEO. No. Demis, yeah, just double checking, where he talks about how they sped up research with AlphaFold, and it's actually really interesting to hear somebody talk about it in a way that isn't necessarily hyperbolic, but it explains the amount of human effort that was compressed into a year. And I think it's like 1 million years of PhD effort compressed into a year of machine effort. Like that to me is some of the more interesting things to think about. Like, what does that actually mean? But also, what does it mean for us, right? If you think about the time and effort that we put in our work, how much of that should happen in minutes versus weeks? How much of that is it really still, can we compress 1 million years of creative thinking into running the machine for a year? Does that give us every idea available in the latent space connected to some category or industry? Like, and what do you
still
do with
can't
that?
write
Like,
a good joke though, Wes. Still can't write
Well,
a good joke.
the jokes aren't great, but I have to say, creative ideation. Like we're lucky enough to have some amazing people on the team that can straddle creative craft and sort of this technology. And it honestly is really interesting to think about, right? But the models have all the ideas. Everything is in there statistically. How do you get at the good ones instead of the bad ones? How do you curate that if an idea can happen every second? Like, how do you curate what's good, what's bad? I think there's
What
a
do you
really
present?
interesting
How do you present
component.
it, right?
Yeah. And are you still presenting, or are choices being made? Like it's I think getting inspiration from other industries and how they're using the sort of massive speed and scale up opportunities and trying to translate that back to what we do for our clients is probably where I get most of my inspiration from it.
And just, I was just going to say, for those listening, Carrie and I have worked with Wes for 15 odd years at this point, and we blew a bunch of smoke about you in the beginning, but I don't think it truly captures kind of like what a mensch and what an outlier you are in terms of like accessibility and then just your aptitude to just elevate your skill sets. Because when we met, you were very much a failed Flash developer turned gregarious EP, and now you're leading a very large organization, and that is helping lead even bigger companies in AI. Like, what do you do? Like, how do you find the time to like just get all of this input? How do you find the time to just think about how that can then distill down to your teams? Like that skill set is like ultimately what I've always thought is your special sauce is just you devour information and you're able to come and make it interesting for people.
Yeah, I mean, gregarious EP was the most fun. Like that's where you got to do the most fun things. So I think it partly maybe comes out of how the company started. Like none of the companies started with people that were creatives or developers or flying people really, right? It was just, this is new, this is interesting, let's figure things out. And I think that role-lessness, like the lack of an actual role, but just what is interesting to do and what does that mean if we try and do it? I'm in year 25 of that cycle. So I think a lot of it is also just you are lucky enough to very young. We were 19 really when we started, 21 when we sort of formalized the business. To be able to do that very young and just continuously decide these little moments and figure stuff out, and understanding that everything is something somebody just made up. You
It's true.
you make it. Everything
Put
started
in a deck, though, it's real.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think the most important skill set is you're allowed to make things up, but then the story you tell is your ability to get other people to help you make the thing real. And sometimes that is with clients, and sometimes that's with internal teams. Often it's a combination of those things. But I think being able to capture a little bit of inspiration or moment and sort of translate that this is what that means is probably the key life skill that I was able to develop because of the work that we do.
You just segued into, if I could just get one more question in, then we can wrap. But I think you just segued perfectly into a question on leadership. And I think what I've seen of you is a real ability to connect with people. And it almost seems like you really thrive in connecting with people. And it doesn't really matter who they are. You know, I noticed that you're very welcoming and open to people. Doesn't matter if they're important or not, right? And I think this is something that really stood out to me and other people who've known you for a long time. And I've known you for 10 years too, just to get it out there. Not 15, but 10. Pretty good. Pretty good.
Mention it.
Anyway, there is a question
better, Golly, if it matters.
Well, I drove him around a lot in LA, and that's a lot of time. But anyway, the question is about leadership, and I think I'm interested if you practice leadership, if that's a question, or if this is something that is sort of organic to who you are. Is this something you had to train for? I see a real gift of leadership and leading people and making them do things they probably don't want to do, similar to what you said about like sell then solve. Right. And to keep a happy face about it and to keep people liking you, like, where does that come from? Is that cultural? Is that trained or what?
Well,
Is it the hat?
The hat helps. Like a lot of it, like I did read a lot about it. Like I read a massive amount of sort of leadership stuff back in the day, really just out of interest. I think learning the different phases of it. So the initial phase, it's all by example, right? It's you're at the office first, you leave the office last. I think just being in the grind and everybody seeing that sort of leadership by example is really important, but also really easy, right? I think if you're a leader and you're like, good luck everyone, I'm going to go home, then that
doesn't work on Slack, does it?
Well, but it sort of sucks, right? So lead by example is the first version of what you have to do or do in these types of companies, but it's also the easiest because it just means you're there. And then hopefully because you're there, it is better than if you're not there, right? So are you keeping people motivated? Are you keeping people, I think, aligned with what you need to do as a company, but also so it makes sense for their personal ambition. But then as the company scales, you can't always be there when it happens. And then it really becomes about some type of cultural imprint that hopefully the team that was around you in that first moment has the imprint to help the next team understand the culture of the company. So that second piece is all about sort of, does the culture scale and resonate? And then the third piece is, can you quantify it? Because you hire a bunch of people and they don't necessarily, they might be 10 steps removed from somebody that was part of that initial sort of culture. That is, then it becomes more about the proclamations and the vision statements and that type of stuff. I think that in my estimation, I think in today's culture, those things just feel a little less real. I think there's a general, I would almost say, trust of that type of stuff.
Very corporate.
Yeah, but also I think people by default are a little mistrustful. Like I would always explain that to people as the company was growing. You'd sometimes run into somebody who thought something sucked, and you're like, nobody's actively trying to make it suck. Like nobody's sitting there going, I'm going to make this really difficult for you. I think people lose the understanding of it's just a bunch of people in a chain. And if something sucks, it's because somewhere in that chain, a mistake was made or something was misunderstood. Yeah. Right. So I think it's really important to try and have people think through. It's very seldom that there's an active mechanic that is making things difficult, right? It's just a bunch of people trying to figure things out. So that level of empathy, I think I try and get people to understand. And we had a fun term when we started putting a lot of teams together. We talked a lot about APIs, but also API stands for assume positive intent, right? We have more and more people that work from home, maybe people that have never met in person because we've been for a long time now quite global. I think there's just
assume positive
value,
intent,
massive value in assuming positive intent. I think just trying to do that yourself hopefully shows other people that is something that is appreciated. I think that's maybe one of the most important skills if you're working in distributed organizations, work from home situations. Like if you don't do that, it's very easy for people to sort of get misaligned.
Yeah, everyone's having a shitty time, just so you know. Well, maybe not totally shitty, but like everyone's got some shit they're dealing with, right?
We still have some sunshine. And beyond that, I think it's just being not being an asshole, which sometimes seems challenging if you look at our industry now.
Two last questions. One is, what impact do you want people to remember you for 30 years from now?
Well, honestly, at this moment, I think this is the most interesting moment. So if there is a discussion 30 years from now
on this show, Second Wind, right now, this interview.
He said it here.
The moment we're in. So this to me, if we manage to do the thing that we're trying to do, and I think we will do, like that will be the legacy.
Thank you. And my final and probably the most important question: when will AI help me understand what my cat is trying to say to me?
I'm going to say 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
I know Meta has a lot of Meta has a lot of progress there already. So they just they hired a bunch of expensive people. They should be able to fix it in 2 years.
I think they all left already.
No comment.
Wes, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Wes.
Thanks, very enjoyable chat.
Really appreciate it, Wes.